Brilliant. The Great Reset. Well, sorry if the last part was damaged. Somebody decided that they wanted to either hack or DDoS or spyware on me. Destroyed the bandwidth because my bandwidth doesn't have enough to share for anything else. Barely does this, as you see by the quality. The actual camera is 4K, but bandwidth only allows this quality of picture. So we'll start again. Well, we won't start again. We'll take off where I noticed. So you might have missed a bit. 1.4 Perspective. 3 Evolutionary. This perspective needs more unpacking than others because it is the most removed from our everyday experience. Understandably, there is some disengagement over exactly when our own species evolved, but our best current estimates based on DNA and fossil evidence suggest we emerged around 350,000 years ago, Hublin et al., from when we first walked the planet until today. We have spent almost all of that time living in small nomadic groups, searching for wild food on the African savanna. This way of life used to be called hunter-gathering, but now most researchers use the term foraging in recognition that collecting food like tubers and nuts often contributes as many calories, if not more, than hunting meat. The modern world of agriculture, cities and industries that recognize around us, at least in the industrialized West, has only been part of the human experience for the past 10,000 years or so. Schools, healthcare, the contraceptive pill, and baby formula are even more recent inventions. If the entire history of Homo sapiens was squashed into one day, these features of modern life would appear in the last 10 seconds, just before midnight. Quite why humans went through such a rapid period of change is another story. But the important point is that humans have evolved to expect certain types of environment or have adapted to solve particular challenges relevant to a different time and place from today. That process of adoption took place in the 97% of our history that revolved around foraging, and not in the most recent 3%, figure 1.48. How does a species like humans become adapted to its environment? The best answers we have in evolution by natural selection, a theory published by Charles Darwin over 160 years ago, although Alfred Wallace was homing in on a similar idea at around the same time. Darwin, 1859, many challenges in life, such as avoiding predators, getting food, finding a partner, fighting infection, or raising children, impact the chances of survival or reproduction of an individual. Solutions to this challenge are called adaptations. We might be familiar with the idea of biological adaptation, like the eye, but the idea of psychological figure 1.4a, approximate timeline of human evolution. B, 2 generations of different infant care strategies. Source Africa Studio Adobe Stock. Adaptation we might be less familiar with. The basic idea is summarized in figure 1.4b with the example of infant care. In this example, there is some variation in how mothers of generations one care for their infants. Most mothers just abandon their infants, leaving them to it. Not an uncommon strategy in the animal world, particularly in insects. However, by chance, one of these human mothers pays special attention to caring for, feeding, and protecting their infant. In this scenario, the mother that provided attentive care nurtures a baby that lives long enough to pass on the nurturing genes to generation 2. Because the baby shares 50% of her mother's genes, the infants who didn't receive that kind of care didn't live long enough to pass on and leave them to it. Parenting strategy. Apply this to a broader range of behaviours that affect reproductive success and repeat over thousands of generations, and thereby species can become adapted to their environment. Key point: the evolutionary perspective explores how the mind is adapted to solve problems that were significant for long periods of human history. Using this perspective, let's ask ourselves a question that might have occurred to any sleep-deprived parent at 3 o'clock in the morning. Why do we have childhood? Because we are so familiar with the idea of childhood, it's easy to forget just how rare it is in the natural world. If we behaved like other mammals of our size, women would give birth every year to 5-pound babies, and the average 6-year-old would already be grandparent on the 2021. Several species of aphid skip the idea of children altogether and give birth to offspring who are already pregnant. Some animals mature fast, others slow. Some have thousands of offspring, others few. Some die while giving birth, serving as their offspring's first meal. Others die alone, not having seen their offspring in months or years. While the basic facts of life are universal: be born, mature, reproduce, age, then die. There are as many ways to organize these stages of life as there are species. Frankenheis and Nettle, 2020. We might not have always had childhood in the way we recognize it today, and to understand how we got here, we need to go back in time. Before our species emerged 350,000 years ago, our distant ancestors have developed many more neurons in an area of the brain called the cortex. Herculano Hausel, 2019a. Neurons are the basic information process units of the brain, and the cortex is the wrinkly outer layer, reasonable for complex skills like learning, problem solving, decision making. We do not fully understand why this change happened when it did, but a more densely packed cortex would have made us better able to adjust to the harsh and unpredictable environments we found ourselves in at the time. Richardson et al., 2005. When the going is tough, being able to adapt to a changing climate, find an alternative source of food, or learn from others could have meant that difference between life and death. Whatever the ultimate cause, our supercharged cortex had some rather profound consequences for the way we lived our lives. One outcome was that we started living longer across a wide range of species. The more neurons in the cortex an animal has, the longer its lifespan. Herculano Hausel, 2019b. Why, as well as supporting complex thinking skills, the cortex plays a role in supporting more basic life support systems too. The core idea is that more neurons you have, the more you can afford to lose before the vital functions they support start to fail. As a result, all stages of a life begin to be stretched out for humans, including childhood. Key point: humans have a very long period of immaturity compared with other species. All the extra brain power created a new problem. Brains are relatively greedy organs to feed, particularly for children. More than 60% of 4-year-old calories go to the brain, at the rest compared with around 20% for adults. Kuzawa et al. 2014. The brain steals so much energy during the early years of development that it actually slows down growth in the rest of the body. Ponza 2021. To find enough food to support our brains, we need to spend less time asleep and more time foraging for food collaboratively. Engelman and Tomasella 2019. What food we did find, we were able to get more calories from the invention of cooking and food cutting tools. However, more time spent fueling our brains meant less time being able to look after our infants. Unfortunately, this occurred just at the time when infants needed more care than ever. Because our longer lifespans, infants remained more helpless, needed more care than ever, and hungrier for longer. Mothers needed help, and that help came in the form of pair bond mates, historically known as dads. Humans are among only 5% of mammals in which fathers provide any care to their offspring. And also, unlike most mammals, we are monogamous most of the time, monogamous most of the time. More importantly, help also came from the wider social support network of friends, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, grandfathers, and in particular, grandmothers. Hawkes et al. 1998. A longer lifespan not only led to longer infancy and longer time to reach sexual maturity, but also a longer post-productive period, along with a few other species of whale, dolphin, chimpanzee, humans, and one of the only species in which females live long after menopause. So raising many children through such a long childhood was only possible with the aid of the village, or at least an extended family with fathers and grandmothers around to help provision and care for the young. Hardy, 2011. Of course, the evolution of childhood was not just neuronal number games. It was what children did with those neurons that created the childhood we recognize today. In order to survive and thrive in such uniquely cooperative childcare environments of the past, children needed some unequally human social skills, such as mind reading, language, and cultural learning. Chapters 3, 4, and 5. And they needed to advertise that they were the social partners of the future. Chapter 2. An extended period of immaturity also allowed more time to be spent doing other things we think of as definitively childlike: exploration, play, and learning. Chapter 5. Key point: humans have evolved some unique social skills that help children survive and thrive in groups. There is a lot we do not understand fully about this picture, and the causal directions are hard to untangle as they happened so long ago. Whatever happened in our past, we know it has driven us in very different directions from our closest living evolutionary relatives today. The chimpanzees, with which we share 98% of our DNA, and are united by a common ancestor from about 6 to 7 million years ago. Because we are so similar yet so different, studying chimpanzees alongside ourselves can reveal a lot about our childhood. Table 1.1. We do not have it in common. Table 1.1 shows both humans and chimpanzees go through at least 3 stages of development: infancy, which extends from birth to weaning, The Juneval, no, I can't say it. June, I can't, why can't I say juvenile? Juvenile, thank you. Period, which follows weaning and when animals most generally fend for themselves, including finding food and shelter and adulthood. When they become sexually mature, perhaps three similarities should not surprise us. Evolutionary speaking, we are closer to chimpanzees than chimpanzees are to gorillas. But it is the difference that are most revealing. Over the course of the relatively brief separation from chimpanzees, humans have added two new life stages. Bogain, 2001. First, in childhood, the time between weaning and juvenile period, characterized by such developmental milestones as language, imitation, and pretend and play. And second is adolescence, a period following the monarch in girls, with rapid growth spurts from both boys and girls, characterized by changes to brain organization, maturization of the body and reproductive system, and psychological and behavioral changes involve increased concern about the self and social awareness. Humans are the only animal that stretch out these teenage years, not having our final growth spurt and delaying reproductive maturity until about 6 years after puberty. Bjorklund, 2020. So returning to our sleep-deprived parents, why do we have childhood? The roots of our childhood are deep, and human childhood dated to emerge thousands of generations ago when we were developing smarter brains that stretched out all of the phases of our lives. Infants were helpless and hungrier for longer, but sexually maturity was also delayed. As Table 1.1, some similarities and differences between chimpanzees and human children that are important for understanding childhood. The time spent after the menopause, those greedy brains required a wide social support group around them to keep them alive, and children need to make themselves attractive to the group that was feeding and protecting them. For most of our history, this picture of childhood has remained relatively stable in the latest 3% of our evolutionary history. A lot has changed as cultural revolutions have overtaken the pace of biological evolution. Under these circumstances, there can be evolutionary mismatches, differences between the expected environment, the majority of our history having been spent in small foraging groups, and the ones that most Western children find themselves in today. For example, an education environment that is passive and sedentary, teacher-led via instruction, and with children separated by age and ability, is at odds with the environment and the most foraging societies, which are typically more active and exploratory, and where adults are largely absent. Age groups of children are mixed, and the learning is achieved more by imitation, observation, and apprenticeship. Shanghari and Swanpool, 2023. Mismatches are just as relevant for parents as they are for children. Parents can end up burned out and stressed because they shoulder the responsibility of child rearing without the large support network to have been so crucial throughout our evolutionary history. Shadhari and Swanepoel 2023. In a survey of 1,904 American grandparents, 43% of them said they live over 200 miles away from the grandchildren. Statista 2012. There are fewer opportunities for future caregivers to learn about giving birth, which can lessen the anxiety of first-time mothers. Hence, organisations like the National Childbirth Trust in the UK are attempting to fill this gap, and fewer opportunities to learn about parenting in general. Hence, parenting books, apps, and gurus together are worth an estimated $372.6 million annually in the US. To be clear, the point is not that a foraging childhood or parenting style is better or worse than other styles, nor is it the way of life to be romanticized. Surveys of small-scale societies suggest that prior to the advancement of agriculture, an average 1 in 2 children did not make it past puberty. Vogue and Atkinson, 2013. The point is that we can expect some mismatches when children are adapted to solve problems in one environment but find themselves in a radically different environment. Key point: evolutionary mismatches can occur when there is a large difference between the environment and the traits that was adapted for and one that was not.